Hello and welcome, everyone.
I don't
I'm
hear
so excited to have you here with us. So thank you so much. It looks like we have
Now I can't hear at
calling
all.
all over the country. So, welcome, Matthew, Melinda, Jackie, Beth Ann, Kelly. Wonderful. So excited to have you here. Today, we have two very special guests. So just before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any trouble with the audio or the video, just go ahead and refresh your browser, and that usually takes care of it. If that doesn't, there is a button on the lower left-hand side of the screen that says Get Audio/Video Help. If you're having trouble with your audio or your video, just go ahead and click that, and that usually should work. So, hi Matt, hi Melinda. So great to have you all here. So today for our very special live event, we are going to be having a controlled substance roundtable with retired DEA Supervisory Special Agent Jack Teitelman. He is the founder and CEO of Titan Group, which is a full-service regulatory compliance, drug security, and anti-diversion solutions provider that serves veterinarians and the entire healthcare industry at large. The team is comprised of former DEA agents and diversion investigators. Titan's teams know the DEA because they have been the DEA. So welcome, Jack. So excited to have you here.
Thank you, Nicole.
Of course. So today's event will run for 60 minutes. So what we're going to start with is just a question and answer session, and that will be followed by an open forum where you can ask any questions that you might have for us. So on the little button below in the white text, it says ask a question. So if you have a question, just go ahead and write it there. In addition, in the top bar, there is a button that says share. You are more than welcome to click share and share this to anyone who might find it helpful. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, Jack, tell us about your background. What inspired you to become a DEA agent?
Wow, you're taking me back in time there, Nicole. So let's go back to the 80s, everybody's favorite time and big hair, watching on MTV. So when I was in college, I was playing college baseball. I grew up in Florida. I wanted to, stay with the sun and fun. I was going to be a school teacher, a gym coach, a baseball coach. And that all kind of went to the wayside when I blew my shoulder out. And, and then I had to figure out that I wasn't going to be a Major League Baseball player. And my whole academic structure changed, and I decided to switch my major to criminal justice. Actually, prior to that, I started nursing school. So that even put me, my mom's a nurse, and I thought that was something I wanted to do. And I actually worked as a nurse's aide while I was in college. So I got a lot of good experience when it came to nursing. But when I switched my major, I was real lucky, and I was able to get an internship with the U.S. Probation Office. And this was when they first started doing what was called pretrial services. And when you got arrested, if that was your lucky thing by the DEA, you had to be interviewed for a bond and a quick bond investigation for the U.S. magistrate, so he could determine to give you bond or not. And what that job did is it gave me a lot of touch with a lot of different agencies, DEA, FBI, everybody. And back then, everybody was bringing everybody in on big drug arrests and stuff. So it was perfect timing, and I was able to go pretty much right from college, almost about 8 months later, right into the FBI Academy, which we went through back then, and then I became a DEA agent back in the mid '80s, which was quite a time to be an agent. So if anybody's ever watched Miami Vice and all the rest of that stuff, but that was kind of, I wouldn't say there was inspiration, but the inspiration of becoming a DEA agent was just timing and being in the right place. And it was an exciting job back then. It was travel the world, do a bunch of cowboy stuff, which it was everything it was supposed to be, and then some. So that's what got me involved with DEA.
That's awesome.
And I can tell you a little bit about where I went from there if you want.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So just real quick, just to take it from the beginning to end. When I finished the FBI Academy, I was in Florida at the time, and they thought it would be great for all of our career for young guys to go to New York City to battle the crack wave of stuff that was in New York. So I was in New York City in the late 80s into the early 90s, and then I transferred. I got into a specialized technical program where our group would do all the wiretapping and video surveillance and GPS tracking on cars and breaking into places and putting bugs. Those are the behind the scenes agents. So I was transferred into that unit. I was transferred to Phoenix, Arizona. I worked there, promoted to the Atlanta Field Division, ran the tech group there. And after 9/11, I was quickly transferred back to New York City to work on some special projects there. And eventually finished my career out in New York City back as a street agent. And that's where I got a lot of, really good experience working pill cases, pill mill cases, heroin cases, and drug diversion, which led me into, why I'm here today and why I have an expertise when it comes to, drug diversion in hospitals and pharmacies and veterinary hospitals specifically.
Okay. Wow, that's kind of runs the gamut. Little
Yeah.
side question. Are those movies from like the 80s, are they accurate? Like as far as kind of like the drug and the police stuff?
Look, there's always the journalistic licensing when they make those things. I mean, look, there's been a lot of good stuff out there and always a bunch of crap. I mean, some of the best stuff now, if you guys are watching Narcos, every one of those Narcos that you've seen, I was in. Those guys are good friends of mine, Steve
Wow.
Murphy and Javier Pena. So, especially the New York one, when they were in New York, anything you saw there, I was involved in. So yeah, the Narcos is good. There's some good ones out there. I mean, there's crap, but just think they're all real. How about that? Give you more allure.
Yeah. So after you retired from the DEA, kind of what led you to work in veterinary practices? Kind of what was your pathway that took you there?
So as things happen in life, it was just happenstance. So we had an older dog at the time that was coming near the end of her life. So our doctor was doing house calls. And so she would spend a lot of time with her. And one of the times she came over for a visit, she's like, "What are you doing now?" And I was like, "Oh, I started this little company and we're doing DEA compliance, consulting for hospitals and, pharmacies and, narcotic treatment facilities." And she's like, "Excuse me, what about us?" She goes, "We don't ever get any training on this. Nobody's ever been around to help us. We have nothing but questions and we can't get good answers from the DEA. So I call the DEA one number, I get one answer. I call another DEA, I get a second. I'm like, "Whoa, wait, whoa, time out." I didn't know. So that turned into me spending a day with 9 of her vet friends and quickly found out that everybody was starving for for DEA, information and knowledge. And so I quickly had to kind of reposition of what we were doing in our focus and really concentrate more on veterinary medicine. And when I did do that, I realized quickly that this is a whole different universe. This is not human healthcare. You guys use drugs differently. You guys talk differently. It's just different. And I felt that, in order for us to really bring a value, we had to learn your industry. So it took us a good year of learning and practicing and going out. And, now we're over 150 hospitals that we've been in, veterinary hospitals. And, so we became expert. We had to learn the language, learn the business, in which we have. And that's why that the veterinary, sector that we pay attention to is probably the one we spend most time in, because we have become very expert in what you guys do.
Yeah, that's amazing. It is, being in practice for so long. I know some of you know my story, some of you may not. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm so sorry. I'm Nicole Clausen, the founder of the Veterinary Inventory Strategy Network. I was just so excited to get started. But, I was in practice for 13 years before I started doing this. And so I can echo exactly what you're saying. There was never any information out there. I mean, what's crazy, I was in a practice for 8 years before I even knew that a biannual count was a required thing. I had no idea. No idea, 8 years, so it's like,
Right.
what you're doing and the information you're providing is so incredibly valuable, and the passion that
Right.
you have for veterinary practices is just phenomenal. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. So, with that
Okay.
being said, one of the big situations that's happening right now is the coronavirus situation, right? We're like smack dab in the middle of COVID-19. So, what are some trends with controlled substances that you're seeing during this COVID-19 situation?
Right, and I mean that's just perfect time to talk about this. And one of the big things that DEA has made some, they've made some emergency changes to the regulations. A lot of them don't apply to veterinary medicine. Some do. Some have they cross over. One of the stipulations that DEA put in the change was that if you're a veterinarian, and let's say you're a veterinarian at a shelter, and that shelter is going to shut down, and it's going to shut down for, like we're all shut down for right now.
Mhm.
And you have that medication, you're the DEA registrant, and that's your medication. What do you do with that? Do you leave it at the shelter? Do you leave it locked up there? Because you're going to be gone for an extended period of time. Well, the answer is take it with you. You own that medication, right? And you need to safeguard that at your house. You can then send an email to DEA and say, look, temporarily, I have, made arrangements to transfer my medication from one location to another. This is temporary, just letting you guys know. And that's about all you have to do. You can go on the website and make a temporary change. You can change your address to your DEA registration if we have veterinarians that are on here. That is absolutely appropriate. DEA understands that this is a very extraordinary time. And, so that in one aspect, they're letting things go loosely. And another aspect we can talk about a little bit later is they're uber aggressive right now when looking at practices.
Yeah.
So, that's probably one of the main things is, just being, realizing of how to manage that. And the other way that you can manage those drugs is, if you have to temporarily, is you can transfer them to another doctor. If you have another doctor that has storage and can be there for safekeeping, you can transfer that temporarily to them, and they can transfer it back after this crisis is over. So there's a couple different things available for that.
Okay. So let's say the instance where somebody does need to store them at their residence for any reason. Does the storage requirements change for that? Like having the very secure lockbox, or how does that work if you're, having it in your home?
Yeah. So, look, it still needs to be stored appropriately. It's, because if we have kids in the house, or animals, it doesn't matter. It needs to be stored in a substantially constructed cabinet, just like the requirements say. What is that? Well, if you decide that if you live by yourself, you don't have any kids, well, you can designate a cabinet, put a lock on it for right now, temporarily. If you have a gun safe, throw it in the gun safe, then you're good. I mean, gun safes are always, compliant. So, so that's probably, the main thing you guys should be concerned about right now is, if I have to lock the door and leave for a while, don't leave the drugs there, because I can tell you, veterinary, when crap hits the fan, and now just throw it out there, Nicole and I have spent some quality time together. So she knows my personality. She kind of knows where I'm coming from. So, and I'm not out there on Debbie Downer and saying, oh my God, civilization's coming to an end, but we can see civil unrest is already starting to happen. People are getting antsy. They want to go back to work. They want their life back. They don't want to wait for some government check. Who does, right? But what does that mean? That means that things could go awry for a while. So, and I can tell you, people know where the drugs are at, and they're down the street at the community animal hospital, and they're going to break in and they're going to get what they want. So, just be aware. We want to, if that is a situation that does come up, your drugs are not there. They're not sitting there waiting for someone to break in to steal your safe.
Yeah,
So it's better off taking those and safeguarding those at your house.
absolutely. It's so important. So let's
Yes.
switch gears a little bit and just talk about DEA compliance in general. So if somebody is completely overwhelmed trying to become DEA compliant, right, the DEA compliance is just not where it needs to be, where do you recommend them starting? What's a good starting place to kind of understand and get them ready? Hi, Carla. Welcome.
So you hit the nail on the head when you started this thing off, and you went, "Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't even know what a biennial inventory was." So all of you out there, if you haven't done a biennial inventory, and that means a count sometime within the 2-year period, sitting down and counting every one of your controlled substances and knowing what you have, that form and substance of that drug today, what you have on hand, that has to be recorded. Put a sheet. There's a special DEA biennial sheet that goes onto it. That's extremely important. As stupid as it sounds and as easy as it sounds, not having that throws you right out the door when a DEA investigator comes in, because the first thing they're going to ask you for, besides your DEA registration, is where's your biennial inventory, because what they have to do is called an accountability audit. And that accountability audit is very simple if you think about it. What have you purchased? What do you have on hand? And what does your logbook say? Right? And if all of that equals out and we can balance out, then you're off to a great start when it comes to dealing with your friendly DEA guy. So that is by far the worst, or the worst thing that you, if you're having issues and you're, what is it that's going to be the one thing that's going to drag me down? Of course, it's going to be record keeping, but it always starts with the biennial inventory and the lack of one thereof.
Okay. So that's where people should get started. So if you have not done your biannual inventory count, now is probably a perfect time.
Right. And don't feel shamed. I'm not shaming you, but I can tell you, I just spoke in front of 300 doctors and I was asked the same question. I said, everybody put your hand up who has a current biennial inventory. 3 people out of, and these were 300 different hospitals. So it's very rare that we walk in and I ask for, we're doing an inspection and I'm like, hey, let me have it. And they hand it to me. I mean, I'm tickled when that happens, because that means someone's paying attention.
Right. Yeah. One of the parts about the network is, in our community, we all know, like, we're all learning and we're only doing the best we can with what we have. So, even that you guys are here and you're learning about this is fantastic, and it, puts you in a really good place. So, kind of on to the next part, what are some of the most important record keeping regulations that you see consistently getting missed from different practices?
So, we'll just kind of go step by step. Let's say that, and these are things that we see all the time. Excuse me. So, you don't have the biennial. Okay, we can work with that. We're going to do one today. So let's get on to let me see your logbooks. And, I quickly can look at a logbook, as you can, and you'll know right off the bat, are things looking good or if they're not looking good. So the record keeping aspect of your logbook is one, are you guys actually, do you actually have a logbook? Right? How many times have I went in and I went, where's your logbook? What? We have to have a logbook? So, trust me, that has occurred. So, the one thing that I look for is, are you reconciling your log? Are you reconciling it? And if you are reconciling, how often are you reconciling? And for those that, and reconciling is not doing your biennial. It's not just counting. It's not just doing an inventory. This is balancing your checkbook. And I know most everybody out there today is probably, if you're over 50, you balanced the checkbook for real. Right? If you're under 40 or whatever, you probably never balanced the checkbook. It's all been electronic for you on the computer. So, but in the old days, you had to balance it. And that means you had to, if you don't balance your checkbook, you don't know how much money you have in your account. You just can't go by what the statement says. So, and that's what we want you guys to realize is, if you don't understand what your balance is, if you're not paying attention to what you've actually purchased, if you don't know what your real inventory you have on hand, those are things that are going to be detrimental to you. So reconciliations is probably the one thing I think that's the most important that's not getting done.
That absolutely makes sense. Yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about is knowing your data, right? So we can make data-informed decisions, and those controlled substances are a huge part of it, So what is coming into your practice? What are you using? Just keeping that beat on that, regularly allows you to kind of make important decisions.
Yeah, and the other, and the whole aspect from cradle to grave of your management of these controlled substances is the one thing that can really shut your practice down. right? The rest of the inventory control, which you do, is vitally important to dollars and cents of a practice. Of course, we have to keep the lights on, but what is the one thing that they can pull away from you that will keep you out of business? Because you can't do your business without drugs, right? You can certainly try, but so just be aware that those things are probably the most important. Is just paying attention to when you order and when you get the drugs in, because DEA now is looking at your invoices. They're looking at the packing slips, right? And we've went over this when we do these audits, and because these are the things I know what DEA is killing you guys on. So if you guys are looking at an invoice right now, or you're looking at a packing slip and it doesn't have someone's signature on it and a date and a witness and that date on there, DEA is going to fine you for that. Right? We just had a hospital. We'll talk about, what's the worst thing on hospitals and fines. And I can tell you, when a DEA guy decides to make a special project out of you, those are the things they're looking for. The things that they're expecting to be done, witnessing, making sure that those invoices were signed. And did you actually see what you got and signed off on it? And we can go on and on and on for that, because that gets into real inventory, putting unique bottle numbers on each thing, correct? Right? So, for those of you that don't know, myself and Nicole have spent hours and days together working in hospitals. So we're very much aware of some of these, the parts that fall off as we're not that we're trying to build the plane as we're flying it. We're just kind of trying to repair it as we're flying it. So
that's awesome. Okay. So just the nature of me being around inventory, I get questions all the time.
Real quick, Nicole.
Oh, yes.
Anyone that sent I'm dialed in under Kelly Detweiler. So if you're sending anything at my name, it's actually Kelly that's responding to you. Just got to let you guys know.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So can you store non-controlled substances with other controlled substances? So can you, if you have maybe like propofol, or maybe you have something that's not technically controlled, can you house that together with your controlled substances?
Right. So, if we're in a vacuum and we're going by the rules, the answer is no, you can't. Right. So, but if you're in a situation, and DEA specifically leaves the rules very vague, and they leave them vague because they understand, finances, and some, one practice doctor, with 2.5 employees might not have the money as a giant referral hospital, who can afford a giant cubec system and all sorts of storage. There are times when DEA will give you special dispensation to store in the same locker, in the same little safe that you might have. We've had those. We've asked DEA to give us special dispensation for that, but for 99% of the time, I don't like to open up a safe and find propofol in it sitting there with fentanyl and everything else, because technically it's not controlled. DEA will cite you for that. Maybe they'll slap you on the wrist. Hey, go ahead and take this stuff out, because that's normally what we do. Or if you have them there, you move it to another shelf. If you have an empty shelf in there that we can kind of morgue off, then that we might be able. Oh, Kelly's on. Then we might just be able to utilize that as our storage for something like propofol and or other drugs that you might have that are really expensive that might go off your shelf, right?
Okay.
And you might have some weird drugs, or cancer drugs, or just other stuff that that isn't scheduled, that's expensive, that that you might want to put in your NARC cabinet. But technically, if you think about gabapentin's another one. That's a drug that's not scheduled in most states. And a lot of times that's just sitting up on the regular pharmacy shelf. So, what do we do with that? That's one of the most highly, stolen drugs now. Gabapentin is more prescriptions are written for gabapentin now than any other drug in the United States.
Wow.
So it has become the go-to human pain drug. Now that we're in the opioid crisis and epidemic, we've gotten away from first line defense of giving someone an opioid. What you'll see doctors now do is an NSAID and maybe gabapentin. So, also you'll see, was it Everclear? Alcohol that's used to induce vomiting for or whatever for animals that ingest radiator fluid. Is that what it is?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Ethylene glycol.
Okay, right. Oh, okay. So a lot of times we'll open up the cabinet and see that sitting in there too. If you're putting it in there for safety reasons, the only thing I can say is if you have enough of those drugs that aren't controlled, get another little safe. Have another cabinet set up that you can lock to keep that stuff in there. Because it is important. I mean, you bring up a really good question. These are drugs that, these are things that can be dangerous. Of course, for some reason, some of them haven't been controlled by DEA, fully on a classification for addiction and danger. But, just be aware that DEA, if you have to, you can ask for special dispensation to keep those together.
Okay, that makes sense. So then, kind of on that note, how do you recommend that practices handle Proin and other List 1 substances?
Right. So, Proin is the thing about Proin. Proin's not going to ever be rescheduled again. I'm pretty sure it's not going to. It's no longer used as a drug on the human side. It was pulled off the market. It was people were dying on it. So, but it works well in animal health, right? So, why is Proin? Why was Proin scheduled originally, and why did they turn around and give the veterinary community special dispensation that it didn't need to be scheduled and that it could be used, off-label for veterinary use? Proin is a really neat drug because it can be broken down and make extremely pure methamphetamine. So that is why it's on the list of list 1, if you want to call it list 1 chemicals that DEA watches the purchases of those drugs. So it's not technically that you guys in the veterinary world are going to come up on what's called an ARCOS list or a specific list from DEA that's searching list 1 chemicals that are being sold around the world for manufacturing purposes, and there's a lot of them. If you think about Claritin D, that has ephedrine in it. Ephedrine is a list 1 chemical, and ephedrine is like Proin, can be used to make methamphetamine. And that's why you can't go into a Walmart now and walk out with 2 giant shopping carts of pseudoephedrine, right? Now you go right. Now you go to the pharmacy and it's behind the pharmacy and you have to give them your license, right? So that was all because of the Methamphetamine Act that was passed, and that's why they track Proin sales. But unless you're buying 100 bottles of Proin at a time, I would doubt any of you would ever get a phone call or a visit from DEA asking what you're doing with those drugs.
Sure, that makes complete sense.
So, and then I'm not sure that if I even, I don't think there's any other weird list 1 chemicals that you guys would be using unless you're in research. There are some, because remember, there's differences between list 1 chemicals and controlled substances, what you guys deal with 99.9% of the time. The only time that I've seen list chemicals used in the veterinary world is in those research facilities if they're testing those on rats.
Okay.
That would be the only time.
Okay. So one of the things that we kind of talk about a lot in our community is, if you have a practice owner, maybe you have an administrator or a manager, doesn't really see the importance of, tight control of those controlled substances. What do you say to that? How do you, kind of navigate that situation?
And thank you for putting that slide up, Kelly. I mean, at that point, if they have decided to be a gambler and go, I don't really, it doesn't mean much to me. DEA has never come to my office. I've been here for 20 years, blah, 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 all the crap I hear, right? Well, I can tell you now that veterinarian hospitals, DEA registrants, veterinarians are certainly on the work plan of diversion investigators across the United States. And if you want to think of it, if each one of those cards that you have decided that that's your non-compliance is $15,040 fine. So for every time somebody goes, I just don't really care, it doesn't mean much to me. Well, guess what? Don't have your registration up to date, 15,000 times. This is out the door, $15,000 fine. And how about this? There's the income card. We have clients that have had their registrations taken from them. So now what happens? I am the veterinarian. I can't work. I'm not allowed to do anything with those controlled substances. I have to go hire Dr. Nicole. So now I've had to go hire somebody. My income has been slashed in half. My reputation is destroyed because I was on the front of the, Montana, Times or whatever it is, right? So, these are all things that can affect, not just affect the practice. The bottom line of the practice can be affected, obviously, if this is going to be a fine involved, civil fines, which will come out of this. So every time you talk about noncompliance and thinking that this really isn't something that we should pay attention to, or it's not just important, just keep multiplying $15,000 up about things that we've talked about, and we have seen DEA guys that have really wanted to make whatever the reason why they went after them, anything that was wrong on the books, on the log sheets, every line was a fine. So when things can add up to $800,000 to $1 million, those things we've seen, and it's all because somebody was, whether they copped an attitude the wrong way with the DEA guy, which is not a good thing to do, or whatever, caused them to make, to pull them out and treat them a little bit differently. And we don't want that. We want them walking out with a warm fuzzy in their stomach, happy that you were prepared. And it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's going to happen one day. And all we want you guys to do is just have a fighting chance, and just pay attention to detail. I know it's hard. Trust me. We know it can be chaotic, but these are things you have to pay attention to.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of what's kind of at stake, what is one of the largest fines you've ever seen for veterinary practice? Tell me all about the fine situation.
Wow. So it's fun. Yeah, we roll right into that. So I believe the largest fine what we've seen in veterinary, Kelly, you can help me, is maybe $1.25 million. Not a big practice, it's actually a single doctor, big hospital, but owned by one doctor. And a young doctor, who bought the practice from someone else and was, the most important thing was continuing to grow the practice, keep up with the work. Well, one of the things that went by the wayside was record keeping. All the record keeping, from invoicing to ordering to logbooks to all that sort of stuff. That is, Kelly, I think I can hear traffic. Somebody in the background.
Oh.
So, mute.
That's here. Kelly, I'm going to mute your mic for a little bit.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Mute you.
Hi.
Yeah, mute yourself.
But what you said before, 1.7 million.
Oh, 1.7.
1.7 million was the fine.
Right. And
you want me to mute myself?
Yeah, I thought I could hear the traffic in the background. Perfect. Thanks. So, not anything that was out of the ordinary for practices that we've walked into before DEA got there, right? And then we walked into, practices that have been an absolute mess. So I wouldn't say they were an absolute mess, but they hadn't made their bed before they left the house. They didn't brush their teeth, right? They didn't clean the sink of all the dishes when they left. The place was a mess. And guess what? They show back up at the house at night and someone's there, the president's there with his entourage that needs to come in and have dinner with you. You'd be embarrassed. The place is a mess. So, and I'm not saying anything's wrong with the house or anything's wrong. The food's not spoiled. Everything's cool, except it looks like a disaster. Well, those things are important. So, but when the DEA does come, and there's some nice DEA guys, and they're like, you know what? Why don't you guys, we'll come back in 30 days. I know you're busy and we'll give you, but maybe you should get some of this stuff in place. Well, they didn't show back up in 30 days because they got busy. They showed back up in 6 months and the place didn't do anything. So that turned into a whole team of DEA guys coming back over, auditing that place for days. And I mean, when they're there for days, they're going to find everything. And that's when I talked about things that they will go through every invoice. They took every invoice, and if there wasn't 2 signatures on it and a witness and the checks next to everything that was ordered to show that was a fine. So that is what beat them up to 1.7, whatever the number. I'm sorry, Kelly, I forgot already. But the good part is we got involved. Thank God. We worked with their attorney. We rehabbed them, put together a whole controlled substance policies and procedure, program for them, redid their logbooks, re-audited them, made sure they were down to the penny, down to the pill. brought DEA back in, and they were thrilled. They were very happy, and that fine went down to $25,000. So that was a win. That was a huge win for everybody, right? Of course, they had to pay us, and they had to pay the attorney. Who cares? It was way less than what they were. I mean, can't even, the percentages are crazy. So it's real. I mean, the threat is real for you guys. And don't think that now, because we're sitting at home and every DEA investigator is sitting at home, that, wow, we can fluff off. No, this is the time you dig your heels in. And now we have time to get our house in place, because I still talk to all the DEA guys. Of course, a lot of these guys are my friends. And I can tell you, they're all go, man, I've never had so much time in my life to catch up on all my cases, to now really pay attention to you guys, right? And that's what they're doing. They're looking at, you said it perfectly, Nicole, you talked about data. Well, what's important to data in the veterinary world is exactly how the DEA guys deal with data analytics. They're looking at ordering patterns. They know, they get these reports from the distributors that sell to you, whether it's Covetrus or MWI or Patterson, whoever. They have to tell DEA who they've sold to and what they've sold them. And we're in the middle of the quotas. And we were in the middle of the quotas for, one reason, which was the opioid epidemic, and there wasn't enough. They decided in their infinite wisdom that the way to deal with the problem was to cut supply. Well, you think about this logically. If you cut me off from my opioids, I'm going to go to the street and I'm going to find opioids on the street. So that's why the overdose rate hasn't went down, because they cut production. It's just went up. So you think of that inverse probability and all that sort of stuff, where these are human beings. They're sick. You can't just stop someone from taking something by cutting them off. It's just not going to stop their habit. So that being said, the quotas have become a main issue when you guys come to ordering, and how that can affect a veterinarian is simple. You guys are different because not only are you the doctor, you're the anesthesiologist, you're the surgeon, you're the psychologist, you're everything, the janitor. So you need those drugs, and you're going to put an order in with everyone. You're going to put an order in with Covetrus, MWI. It doesn't matter. You'll even pay more to get it from a compounder. And then, oh my God, every one of your orders gets filled. It's like, oh my God, I just got 75 bottles of fentanyl in. What am I going to do with all this fentanyl? Well, guess what? You're going to hopefully store it correctly. But now the DEA is wondering why you usually buy 10 bottles of fentanyl and you just bought 75. That's a red flag, and that kicks off what's called a suspicious order in DEA's system. And they need to review those, and they're going to investigate that. Now you might get lucky, and that just might be a phone call. Hey, and then you explain it to them. They go, oh, thank you. And trust me, typical DEA agents, I have been getting the phone calls from the diversion investigators that don't do a lot of veterinary work. And that's the other thing, is most diversion investigators will go their whole career without stepping foot in a veterinary hospital. And that's a good thing, and it's a bad thing, because they don't understand your world. And think of it that they just came from a human place. They were just in a CVS pharmacy, and in a CVS pharmacy, they've got roll down gates and gun turrets and lights and sirens and gigantic. I mean, that's what they're used to seeing, right? Not walking in a vet clinic and going, you don't even have a camera in here. Do you have an alarm? No. Well, where's your box? Well, it's in the cabinet, or it's in a pull-out drawer. Their minds just, they're going to understand how you guys, I'm just throwing, that out. But that's, you're probably in that situation, you're probably get a phone call from a diversion investigator asking, hey, what's up? And what we've done is we've let DEA understand what's happening in veterinary medicine. We've let some of the key diversion investigators who've asked us, hey, should we be going after them? And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. And then we'll help them with that a little bit. I go, no, this is just, we're in the middle of quotas, and they're trying to order and get whatever they can. And every once in a while, they get 5 orders filled. So, just be aware that, don't be scared. When this happens, you have a right to try and, keep your inventory where you need to provide the best medicine for our fur babies. But, be aware that could kick off what's called a suspicious order.
That absolutely makes sense. So again, kind of rolling on that note, what is the most shocking thing that you've seen in a veterinary practice? Like your jaw just dropped.
Well, if I had Andy here, I could give a couple stories of some animals laying there that he thought were sleeping. But I mean, look, we have been in the veterinary hospitals from New York to Hawaii, and then everywhere in between. We have seen good, we've seen great, and we've seen some that I walked in, and the best way I can describe a couple of these places is if there was a rabid coyote, and Kelly's heard me say this many times, in front of the place that just got clipped by a car, I would throw him into my trunk and take him to a place 5 miles down the road. Because the subpar medicine that was, think about this. If I walk into a place and I can tell right now that I wouldn't bring that animal in there, I'd fear for his life because place is a disaster for many reasons. OSHA, just safety and, hygiene. How do you think their controlled substance compliance is going to look? Right? Or non-existent. So, and when it comes to most eye dropping, walking into a very large facility that had no security, no cameras on the closet that their controlled substances were being stored in. Same closet was used where all their PPEs were stored in. So everybody all day long was coming in and grabbing all the stuff for surgeries and stuff. And that was just a regular filing cabinet with no locks on it. And which was next to the loading dock where people were coming and going all day long. So when you say, and then when you get a call and says, "Oh, we had a bad theft," you didn't know it was coming. So, I guess the worst things, outside of just really subpar, medicine is lack of security in areas that, we're in 2020 now. This shouldn't be, I shouldn't go in any place that doesn't have a burglar alarm and some camera system. I mean, and this is what DEA is going to expect at a minimum, because you have to protect the drugs that you have in your facility, which means they have to be stored compliant. And, is compliant, having your drugs in let's just say just a regular cabinet with just a key lock on it, and not even a double locked, is that standard? Well, probably not. Right now we add a double lock component to it. Is this good? It's probably will meet the minimum. What I'm getting at is, think of how you would want to safeguard a gun. I want to put a gun in a little gun cabinet or safe that you can buy, or am I just going to throw it in a drawer and put a little lock on it? All compliant in the eyes of DEA, but just think of how you want to protect that against a child trying to get into it. Is this really child resistant? So that's it's shocking. I've seen lots of shocking things when it just came to to me, which looked like animals suffering and just not getting the appropriate care. But I'm not there to judge that. I mean, if it was something that I needed to report, obviously I'm going to report it. Or I'm going to work with them. I mean, we're dealing with risk management for you guys. And there's a lot of times when we deal with the doctors that they start asking other questions. And I'm an open book, and I've seen a lot in my, my little bit of life because of my career. And we have a lot of answers to a lot of weird questions. And so, but we'll take that. I mean, I'll take that upon us to try and help people with that. So, when we're there, we're there to help you guys as your compliance consultant with DEA issues, but we're also there to help you guys when it comes to anything that's risky. I don't want to walk into a place and go, "My God, you're going to fail us OSHA inspection tomorrow." Right. Your hazardous waste is sitting in a pile in the back and it's melting through something. So, these are things that we're going to bring. We're going to bring your light to it if we see it, and then we want to fix it. We want to help remediate issues that could be fatal on site and not walk out of there until we feel that that those things would be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So if practices are feeling like way overwhelmed and they're like, okay, I need some expert help, how can you help practices?
So for what we do is, I look at what we do best is what you see on here is education and training. really, that's what this is all about, is us just educating everyone, educating the veterinary community about how to effectively handle controlled substances, right? And this isn't rocket science, but it's a science that can turn difficult if people start passing down, hey, this is how we've always done it. Just do it this way. Okay, I guess that's how Mary used to do it. Now I'm going to do it the way Mary did it. So,
Right.
And maybe Mary got most of it right. Maybe she got 75% of it right. That's still a lot. That's wrong. So training and education is the most important thing. And we provide that either in webinars like this. We have training on our website at our Titan Group website. And those are race approved training, and they will talk about a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today. And most everyone that takes that, we get great feedback on the training and education that they get. I think the coolest thing that we have right now, and we've talked about this because we've went back and forth on a few of these topics, is we have developed a remote compliance gap inspection, and we are going to roll that out within the next week or two, which is going to be available to everybody in the veterinary community. And this is a really neat product because you don't have to leave your desk. We don't have to, at this point, come and do a physical inspection. This is a gap analysis. This is a virtual gap analysis where you can be sitting at your desk with a copy of your invoices. You can scan those invoices right from your phone. And what that does is we're going to gather all the information that we would if we were on site, and then we're going to analyze it. And then you are going to go through a checklist. It's our checklist that we've developed and hit all the questions of what we feel that are important to be DEA compliant. And that's all going to be compiled and reviewed by our investigators, the DEA guys that work with us, or myself, whoever's going to do it. And then we're going to go over, and you're going to get a complete analysis and review, and you're going to be graded, and you'll see exactly where you're at. And what it does is it gives us it's a health check, if you want to look at it. And if you think of it that, you don't feel good, you go to your doctor and he does a physical, right? That's what we're doing. But we're kind of doing a telemedicine physical on you. So I'm going to be able to determine in a way that, you know what, you kind of have high blood pressure. It looks like your blood works off a little bit. And those are all things that would be record keeping's off, right? Security might be wrong. Those are all the things that are wrong with you physically. Well, those are the physical things wrong with your practice. And then we need to now come up with a way to fix it. Now, whether that, if I was the doctor, I might say, hey, we gotta do surgery. You got to send you to a cardiologist, and we got to fix your heart. Well, that would be our next deep dive. Those are the remediations that we would do. So, whether it's we have to show, then at that point we might have to come to your practice, and like what we've done before, go spend several days at a hospital, remediating all of the issues that, because a lot of this stuff you get to a point that you can't fix it yourself. A lot of times, there's some things I used to not do. I used to not do my tax. I used to try and do my own taxes. I don't do my own taxes anymore. And I used to cut my own hair. No, I didn't cut my own hair. Now I cut my own hair. So, you never cut your own hair and don't do your taxes. And so this is one of those things. You get to a point and you throw everything out. So I don't know what to do. Let us help you. This is, because this is something we don't want anybody to have to not sleep at night. And we get a lot of those calls. I can't sleep at night. And I'm like, we can help you with those things.
Yeah, that's amazing. So thank you so much for all this. Now we have some really great questions that have come in from some of the members. So first question, overfill. How often, and is there a certain way to adjust for overfill? We are an equine clinic, and our ketamine is almost always overfilled 0.5 to 2 mils per 10 mil bottle. Since we usually use more than one bottle per case, our log is often off. We always have more than what the log says. How concerned should I be?
So, good question. That was a really, I'm sure everybody has a question on overfill. And how do how do you deal with that? So, DEA realized that's a manufacturing process, that they want to, FDA, wants to make sure that you get what you pay for. So you're paying for 10 mils of that drug. So they always put a little extra in there. And that's also put in there for hub loss. And, so that overfill, you either calculate your overfill at the beginning of the bottle, of the vial, which means you would have to extract it out to see exactly how much we have. And that's what we're starting with in our logbook. So if you take that 10 mils of ketamine and you write down 10 mils of ketamine in your logbook and there's overfill, well, you're not starting with the correct balance, right? DEA expects that you can account for every drop that's in that bottle. So if you haven't accounted for the overfill at the beginning of the bottle, you have to account for it at the end. So I'm assuming that if none of you are either weighing the bottle to see what my weight is, and then calculating it down off of weight and using volume at the same time, that is a very appropriate way. Weighing is the most efficient way to deal with overfill, because you're not dealing with it. You're starting with what that bottle weighs, the tear weight, what's in there. We can go off on weight for a long time, but let's just stick with volume. So if you're getting down to the end of that bottle, you're going to go below zero and you're going to go into negative numbers. And those negative numbers are accounting for the overfill which you have. So if you're going into negative numbers, it's a good thing because you're accounting for what's all the rest. I would prefer that we know what we're starting with at the very beginning for drug accountability purposes, because for those of you that aren't accounting for hub loss, and if you're not accounting for overfill, someone that's addicted in your practice they know that there's a mill waiting for them to take off of every bottle, and they'll take it, right? And those that take more will try and stick something back in there, like whatever, water or saline. And we've run into that. It's funny, equine question, we had that issue happen to us. We've done a lot of equine facilities throughout Kentucky and Florida. How would you like a 1,015-pound racing horse to start to wake up when he's laying on his back sitting on the table because the ketamine has been adulterated, right? Because they're waiting with another bottle of ketamine to put that right into that horse the minute he starts to moving his legs, like, because he's dreaming. He thinks he's racing, and as he's sitting there. So horrible situation to happen. But you need to, on top of accounting for the overfill, you need to make sure that you account for that in your hub loss, because that's where it's actually going to come out. Because not only you need to know what you started with, how many times have we hit that bottle? And if we've hit that bottle 20 times, ketamine, they're only hitting it probably once or twice because they're using it for big. But those of you that are using it on smaller animals, you might hit the bottle a lot. Every time that you've taken it out, that's hub loss. So you account for that. Pull a number out. Use 0.1 and that's it. Use 0.2, that's it. Stay consistent. That's my hub loss for every bottle.
Sure.
Bigger needles, bigger hub loss, right? If you're using the big 50 mil bottles of fentanyl and you're using a big thing to pull it out, that's a more hub loss than you would be on a tiny little needle that you're, the diabetes needle that you're using on something else. There's barely any hub loss on those. So just be aware that that's, I hope I explained that correctly for you guys to understand.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Let me know if the chat, if you need more clarification on that for sure. So we'll go on to the next question here. It looks like Kelly has answered some of the questions here for you. Okay, here's one. Okay, anonymous question came in. How do you add an entry that might have been missed from the day before in your logbook? And then is there a proper way to make a correction?
Right. Yeah, good question. So, you have your logbook, went down, and this happens, sometimes people will keep all of their either, surgery notes or anesthesia notes, or even just all of everything from the day before. And I'll get to it, too busy. I'll go back and heck, I've seen them all in the yellow Post-its, right? A ton of yellow Post-its that need to go into the drug log. Make sure you just got to make sure that they get in there, and you just go in and you go into the next available line in your drug log, and you're going to, because it's all about, as long as you're filling in all the correct identifiers and the date and the time, and you can write a little thing in there, or, like, you've heard me, harp on this, take a lot of notes. Use the back sheet of your logbook. If there's, use the back cover of the logbook. Weird things that happen, just write it down. Have a diary, because that way you can explain it. Explain that a dog got hit near the end of the day and we had chaos and it was a 2-hour surgery and we just didn't get to it because we were all tired and we worked 12 hours. I'll do it tomorrow. totally acceptable, but just make sure that you document it.
Okay.
Stop laughing at me, Kelly. Okay.
And then what about if they need to make a correction, if they kind of, you don't want to, how do you correct your logbook if you're like, oh, that was wrong?
Right. Whatever you do, don't use whiteout. If you make corrections and let's say, oh man, I screwed my math up here and there's 10 things I've got to do to make my changes. Little line, make the change, a little initial.
Okay.
That's it. And then you can write a little, make yourself a little note of what caused that issue.
Perfect.
If it was strictly a math error, it's a math error.
Excellent. Okay, next question here. So this comes in from Matthew. Thanks for the question, Matthew. So once a month, we compare our practice management system, controlled substance orders, and patient entries to the binders that are filled out with the same thing, and making sure the entries and accounting match, and then compare those totals to on hand and make sure they match, and then we reconcile, make acceptable variances, and does the biannual inventory check still need to be done?
Yes. So what they're doing is excellent, right? They're really staying on top of what they're the excellent inventory accountability. But still, the biennial has to be done once within a 2-year period, and that's that count. What they're doing is a daily inventory, a daily reconciliation, keeping up with that. So listen, some states have you do an inventory once a year, like every May or June or whatever it is. It's acceptable to take one of those state inventories and slap a DEA biennial sheet on the front and says, here's my biennial. We have got practices that we have doing a biennial every month because we're forcing compliance on them. They've been spanked. So now, not only are they going to do a biennial, but we're going to do it every month because we're not giving DEA any leeway now because now they're under a forced compliance by DEA. They're on a 3-year probation, meaning DEA is going to come back to do spot checks. And so think about your biennial. When I said doing an accountability audit and it starts from your biennial, what if you did that biennial 23 months ago? They're going to go back 23 months to start the audit. We don't want that. I would rather they go back 1 month and go, oh, here's my last biennial. I did it last month. They don't have to know that you did 20 other ones. They're not going to see those, but here's your last biennial. And they give, so they might go back 3 months. Oh yeah, well, we haven't, you want to limit the scope of what they get to look at, right? And that's one way to do it. Stay consistent. You can do biennials every month. You can do them every 6 months. We don't care. Just do them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Okay, so next question. Now we are going a little over on time. Is that okay? Are you guys good with time? Or is that okay if we go a little over? Okay.
Yeah. I might have to switch to my. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so another question here. So we are a mixed animal practice, both in clinic and in the field. We do a large amount of farm calls. Should we have a separate drug log book for the lockbox in the farm drug truck?
Okay, some of it got broken up a little bit.
Okay. I know sometimes the audio cuts out. So this is a mixed animal practice, both in clinic and in the field. We do a large amount of farm calls. Should we have a separate drug log for the lockbox for the farm truck?
Yes, 100%. So if you're going to have the narc box in the clinic, and you are going to take those drugs and you're going to use them out in the field, that you would transfer those need to be transferred out, and those are going to be have their own law book. So it'll be in it would as this if you had a backstock safe, and then you should have a backstock inventory of that backstock safe, right? So when you move X amount of drugs from your backstock to your treatment safe, we need to have something showing the transfer. So it would be the same thing. We're going to transfer from the backstock, treatment, whatever you want to call it, the hospital, to the truck. But the problem is that's only for temporary storage. So you should not be leaving any controlled substances sitting in your equine vehicle that goes out every day. You're going to have it full of every other drug known to man, but technically, when you get back to the shop, those should go back and be stored in there where they're supposed to be stored. And I know that nobody does that. It's very rare because I've been in 1,000 equine, trucks. Some do. But you also have to think about it for those equine doctors that are out there or people that are riding around. A lot of times you don't go back to the hospital, you go home, right? So you need to make sure that you safeguard those drugs when you go home, because again, that is temporary storage. If you ever get questioned because you had someone break into your truck at night, what are you doing with those drugs at your house? Oh, the black bag rule says the black bag rule says that you're allowed to be able to drive around with those and cross state lines and all the sort of stuff that has to go with the black bag rule. It doesn't give you the ability to store them outside of where they're supposed to be stored, which is on your DEA registration, which is going to be your animal hospital.
Okay.
Unless you have a secondary registration at your house, when some doctors do.
Okay. So if they have controlled substances in their farm trucks, those technically are considered temporary storage, and they need to be kind of put back at the end of the day, if you will, or end of whatever, to wherever that DEA registration address is listed.
That's right. And you keep them separate, because if you're going to say, look, this butorphanol and this X and this is for equine, have a separate little area for storage in your safe, because you don't want anyone to start using, because you're going to have different logbooks with those. And what we'd like for them to do is, equine works best is that you have, one bottle of ketamine, one sheet that goes with it to the truck. Here's your logbook sheet for ketamine bottle number 7, right? You run that ketamine bottle out, whatever, or butorphanol is a good one, because when horse doctors they'll take butorphanol and they use little bits and pieces of it, and they might go to a herd and do 15 horses at one time. Give them a little butorphanol, do their physical or whatever they're doing to them and go on. So they'll have a lot of lists for butorphanol, but we want it all on one sheet. And when this bottle's empty, bring this bottle back with the sheet back to your inventory manager, and that goes in the book. That's how we want you to see it.
Okay. And so Annalise had a kind of an add-on question to this. She asks, how important is the address the drug was administered in the drug log, right? So you have that little address line. How crucial is that?
So, that's a good question, because it is kind of crucial. What we don't want to see is doctor went to ABC Farms and all we saw in the drug log was 25 horses, 25 injections, blah, blah, blah. We want it needs to be, this is the location, ABC Farms in such and such, wherever it is. And you really have to say Horse Johnny, this, whatever it needs. We need to have every horse that it was done on.
Okay. So you can't just be like, okay, we saw 25 head of cattle and they got, 10 mils total.
You can do that if you're doing other type of herd work, antibiotic, you're giving all the cows an antibiotic shot, or you're giving them some other weird shot. We don't deal much with USDA type medicine stuff, but they do it. It's still considered herd work when you're going and you're working, if you're seeing horse to do, we see it. Just make sure that you document what the horse's name is and why you. Kelly, you back on?
Oh.
Okay, I hear a bunch of noise.
Yeah. Kelly, I'm going to mute your mic here. Sorry. Oh, there we go. One of the perks of being in a rural area, I never have traffic. Okay, so look like next question here. So Beth Ann had a question. She thinks she has it answered, but maybe you want to add on to it. So she said, how do you account for hub loss when drawing up small doses of a controlled drug? And her second comment was, I believe my question has been answered, a consistent volume for hub loss and accountability. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything onto the hub loss question there. Oh. Jack, are you there? Oh, we might have.
So you bring me the computer. It should be right over for the
Jack, are you still there?
So it also the needle and how many times?
Oh, I can. Are you there, Jack?
I don't know what's going on here. I'm here.
Okay, there, I can hear you.
You there?
Yes, I think your internet may have cut out for a second.
Okay. I'm not. Yeah, things went wild. Okay, I'm just trying to. There we go. All right. You guys got me? You here?
I don't. Do you want to refresh your screen really quick?
Okay. I think it's doing it right now.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't quite see it yet.
All right, let's just go with answering the question.
That sounds perfect.
And maybe I'll pop up. Okay. So I believe this is about hub loss. The main thing about hub loss is to be consistent. There's been very few studies on hub loss. And there's been one study which is done out of, I forgot, some college in California, UC Berkeley, I believe it was, that the average hub loss amount to be used was anywhere between 0.1 and 0.5. You know, you can go right down the middle. I would rather you use somewhere between 0.1 and 0.2 as your hub loss. That is probably appropriate, and stay consistent. So if you have 25 poles, at the very end of the bottle, you should go 25 times 0.1 hub loss, and that should hopefully have you equal out to 0. Kelly's giving me a message.
You
lost my sound. Okay, so Kelly's out of sound. Okay. Yeah, something happened. Coronavirus. See, I was smart to put this on.
In our internet.
Yeah, I know they can't see that.
I know. I think we have the broadband is just being killed with all the people commuting.
It is. Oh, totally, it is. So what was?
No, I think that kind of answered it. So, yeah. So thank you. Okay, yeah. And okay, so it looks like Kelly answered this question. So this one, again from Matthew, thank you for the question. So if a local clinic wants to get a controlled substance, do you need to have them fill out a 222 and list you as the pharmacy? Anything else other than keeping the copies? So I think this comes into play, like if somebody, like a clinic down the road, like ran out of a medication and needs to get it again.
Yeah, so no, you don't have to say you're a pharmacy. And if it's for a Schedule 2, yes, you have to do a 222 transfer. So you're selling that drug to the other doctor. Very simple. You're selling it on a 222. If it's a 3 through 5, it's just going to be on an invoice. You're going to type up an invoice and you either sell it to them or you give it to them at no cost, just as long as you have that paper trail. But so that goes into, but Matthew leads me into something else is, if you are doing that a lot, Matthew, and those clinics are only buying those particular drugs from you and not a supplier, they're going to go over what's called the 5% rule. Both of you are, which means, yes, you would be considered a distributor. And you don't want to be considered a distributor. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that has to in the world of distribution that you don't want to be involved in. So, but the crazy thing is, under the COVID right now, they've waived the 5% rule. So everybody out there right now can be giving everybody whatever you need. And it is important because that we get calls from hospitals recently and they're like, we're running out. Because of the quotas. And we had to really help them stay below 5%. But right now, if you have 25 hospitals and one hospital is your big referral hospital, they're able to order a ton of stuff because of just sheer economics, and they'll sell them those larger amounts. They can order for everybody right now, and then you can distribute throughout the company. You got the option right now to do it until this is over. That is an option.
Okay. Good to know. Interesting. Okay, the next question comes from Kelly. Hi, Kelly. So glad you're on with us. So she says, I have 2 binders kept in the safe, Schedule 2 and the rest of the schedules in the other binder. Should the biannual counts be stored in a different binder? They currently reside in each respective binder in the safe. So can they be with your logbooks, or do they need to be separate from that?
Either way is fine. Let me tell you something, they are ahead of the game. If they got biennial inventories somewhere they can get their hands on, they win. That's a great start. So yeah, I've seen them in the folders. I mean, I'd prefer that you just had a separate folder for biennial, your biennial inventories or on any count inventory. But if it's working for them, then let's don't overturn that apple cart.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Okay, this question from Angie, great question. What should you do when you suspect a client is using a controlled substance prescribed for her dog?
All right, so this happens a lot lately, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to put a needle in their arm, or they don't want to sniff something. So they're going to always want pills. So if they can't get pills from the regular doctor, of course, maybe they're going to get a pill they're going to use the animal's drug. So if you suspect that, there's a very simple way to see if that person's really paying attention. And I would basically call them in the next time when they're coming for the refill and say, look, we didn't get an order in this week, but I have something really neat that we can change you to. And it's something called an NSAID. What's the name of the one NSAID you guys use a lot on animals?
Well, Rimadyl, Galliprant.
Yeah, Rimadyl, right. So they're like, hey, we got this great drug, Rimadyl. And they'll look at you and go, no, that doesn't work. If they start arguing and if they actually know more about that drug than you do, and a lot of times it's tramadol. Tramadol is a great drug for someone who's an opioid addict and they don't want to get sick. Tramadol is a good synthetic opioid that'll keep them from getting sick. They're not going to get high on it, but it'll just keep them, maybe just keep the DTs off just long enough till they get something else stronger. So I would start it off. The conversation is I want to try a different drug, and watch the look on their face and just be consistent. Say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to put him on this for a while. I need to do some drug work. I need to check the animal's titers, because in the human world, this is why you have to come in every 30 days to have either a drug test or blood work taken, because the doctor has to see how you're doing in his practice of trying to regulate you in your pain. So he might have to move you up in your pain meds, or he might move you down, all based on when he looks at your blood work, right? So if he sees all of a sudden you're way down here, he goes, "Are you not taking your medicine?" Right? But you can do the same thing with the dog. You can look, the dog's in pain because you can look at him. You're palpitating. You guys know, because that's your life. You know when a dog's in pain. I don't. You guys do. But I can certainly tell it with science. I can look at a titer chart and say, wow, this dog is not being medicated. Matter of fact, there's no tramadol in his system. Just do a urine test on the dog. So there's a lot of things you can do. And then you'll see if you cut that person off and they get pissed off, and they'll never come back as a patient. They'll go find another hospital to try and cheat.
Sure. Yeah, I remember the first time so this was like, back when I was a baby, and I was like, this is weird. And it was when I was in Billings, Montana, and she was trying to scam tramadol from us and like 4 other clinics around us. And I was like, 2 and 2 is not coming out 4. I will never forget that, because I was like, oh, people do that? I think I was like 19 at the time, and I was like, what?
Yeah. That's right. So.
Okay. So next question. Are you still good on time? I just want to make sure I know we're kind of going over here.
I'm good. Let's go to 3:30. If people are sticking in there, we still got people sticking in.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's go.
So great group. Okay. So we scan our invoices into our main computer weekly. Should we be keeping our physical copies? If not, would it be best to save controlled substance invoices into one specific file?
So, good question. I mean, we're in an electronic world. We're in a paperless world, right? But DEA expects to see original documents. When I go into a location, I say, "Can I have all your invoices?" They go, "Well, the invoices went to the accountant to be paid." I'm like, "Oops. Well, that's not where they're supposed to be." So you can certainly scan them, put them into your system, but make sure that those original invoices are stored somewhere if you have to get at them, right? So, and then they also have to be, there has to be separation of drug class. All your Schedule 2 invoices have to be separated from your Schedule 3 through 5s. And then your next question is going to be, well, what if they all came on the same invoice? Well, that happens all the time. So then you have to designate, well, this one highlighted, this is my original, and then they have to make it, this, you're going to get forced into making a copy of the other ones. You just write on there, this, blah, blah, blah. They'll understand that. Because you'll go grab the original. If you ever get audited, it'll have all the drugs on there anyways for them to look at.
Sure.
So, but what you can do, if it causes issues, you can call your sales rep and say, do me a favor, anytime I make an order, separate those, shift Schedule 2s, separate than the 3 through 5s, and make sure I get a separate invoice. They can do that for you. It's easy.
Perfect.
So,
yeah, and I always think, I'm like, if the DEA is standing in front of me, I don't want to personally be having to print off 2 years worth of invoices. Like, that's not something that I want to be doing.
No, and they will fault you for that, because they will not allow you to use your supplier as your filing cabinet. So you bring up another good point, and we have run into this, is you don't want to learn your computer system the day the DEA shows up. You don't want to get on the phone with Nicole and go, "Nicole, how do I pull out a controlled substance report? I don't even know how to use this." The DEA is going to smile, and then they're going to go, "We'll be back."
Right.
And you better hope that within that brief period of time, you figure out a way to print that stuff out of your system. And that goes for those of you that aren't using regular logbooks and you're using your PIM software as your electronic logbook, right? Have you ever tasked it? Have you ever went in and tried to interrogate it to print up the things that DEA is looking for? And print them up is one thing. Can you put it on a data stick for me? Right? So these are the important things. You have to export it out so I can put it onto an Excel spreadsheet and work with it. So those of you that think you're cool and everything's great because your PIM software is doing it for you, well, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And chances are it's not.
Exactly.
Right.
Perfect. So that's a great answer. Thank you for that question. Okay, next question. Okay, this comes in from Jill. Thanks, Jill. Does a hospital management system that accounts for a substance from the time it is ordered and invoiced to the time it is used each time by a doctor, each bottle is also assigned to a doctor, does that take the place of a paper log? They're an ambulatory equine clinic.
So I'm assuming that question she's saying is that's a completely electronic system. They're not everything, so that it sounds like it's being appropriately tracked, and it sounds like it's a really good system if the way it's being described to me. But then again, I literally spent an hour and a half with another company that has their hospice doctors, and that's all they do is house calls, and they have their own internal system set up. It sounds similar to what you're talking about. Everything's assigned to the doctors. It's all there. It's all on the screen. But when we started to try and pull it all together and bring these, we had some problems. So, conceptually, it sounds like it's compliant, but then it comes down very simple. Print out the drugs. Show me the log, print out what should look like a logbook. Because what's going to happen is if you make it very difficult, if on the DEA guy, if you hand him a box of records, he's going to have to go through your box of records. If you hand him some beautifully, a binder with everything in it and a data stick, you just made him happy. So we want that data stick to be able to not only be something he can pop into Excel and it's all brought up like it looks. If all of you have looked at Nicole Clausen's logbook, that's what it should look like. right? It should print out with all of those columns and rows so that it makes, date, time, who the person was, what was administered, the animal, all that sort of crap should be there. It should be easy to get that and be able to extrapolate and go and play around with in Excel.
Yeah, because I think some of the things that, that you and I have found together is that these practice management systems don't necessarily have all the required columns. So, we're sometimes seeing these gaps. So it's going to be really important, to make sure that even if it technically could be compliant, we want to make sure it gets all the way there.
Correct. Yeah. And if maybe it sounds like that, I might want to spend a little time with that equine, company outside, because I'd at least maybe take a look at it and take a look at their program.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question. This is from Deidre, it looks like. So if there is a DEA premise holder for the facility and a DEA license holder, a veterinarian working there, are both responsible for any errors or non-compliance related to controlled substance use, storage, and logging?
Okay, so if I get that question correct, they have a DEA facility license, and there's also a DEA veterinarian with a DEA registration. Yeah. Now, the other part of that question is, who's the fiduciary on the facility license? Is it the same doctor? And who's ordering, which DEA registration is being used to order the drugs? Because most of the time when you have a facility registration, it's on a large hospital, right? And you have a lot of doctors that are running around in there that don't have a DEA registration. So how do they write a prescription? Well, we're going to use that facility registration and put a three number code or letter code after it, a prefix, and that's going to be assigned to every doctor that doesn't have a DEA registration, so that they can write prescriptions off of the facility registration, right? So, if there's issues with prescription fraud, if there's issues with doctors writing bad prescriptions, it's going to come back on the holder of that facility license. They're going to eventually have some type of repercussion. Of course, the doctor that was writing that prescription on the facility license, and then whoever has ordered those drugs, and we've had record keeping issues. So it could all be the same person. It could be two different people. And you don't necessarily have to be a DEA registrant. I mean, you don't have to be a doctor to be the fiduciary on a facility license. So you think about a major hospital system. The person who has the facility license for the hospital down the street could be the COO. It could be this chief medical officer, who could be a nurse, right? So the short answer is yes, everybody could have exposure. It just depends on where you're at in the line of how everything's set up in that hospital.
Perfect. Okay, so it looks like last question here from Tim. So hi, Tim, by the way. So from what I understand, prescriptions of over 14 days of controlled substances need to be reported in Washington State. Tramadol has a very wide range of dosing, so clients can use it on an as-needed basis. Do you report the prescription based upon the maximum dosing or the minimum dosing? Many people can spread out a prescription given for 10 days to 14 days if they're using it sparingly.
So I'm assuming that, I guess maybe there's a couple parts to that. And this has to do with the PMP in that state of Washington. Yeah. Which I'm not honest. If I would have known that question was coming, I would have looked, just familiarized myself a little better. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but I guess what you're trying to say is, if we're writing for some that they're using sparingly, if we stay under the 14 days, then they won't have to report it. But you know what, I don't think I can give a good answer on that one, because if you write it for 14 days and that's what the rule says for the PMP, you got to go ahead and submit your PMP report for the month, and that would be one that would be on it. I don't think that, these are ones that are being dispensed from I'm assuming being dispensed from within the animal clinic themselves. So it's not like they're writing a prescription and it's going to a pharmacy. I really believe it has to do with the days, not, I know what you're saying. It's one pill. It can be broken up into 4 doses maybe, but still, if you've written a prescription for 14 days, and that's what the rule is for the PMP in Washington State, I would go ahead and make that submission.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Tim, if you have other questions on that, I would reach out to what the Washington State specific thing, because Washington State is kind of fussy sometimes. Okay, so, and actually he added one more piece onto that. Uh-oh, where did it go? Oh no. Oh, do you have to have different logbooks for different size bottle of medication as long as they're the same strength and concentration?
So it was described to me from an old school diversion investigator a long time ago that DEA doesn't care if you buy 10 gallons of fentanyl or 10 ounces of fentanyl. You got to track that fentanyl, right? So if it's the same, they're looking at drug class. Now there might be a fentanyl patch that has to be tracked differently. There might be a fentanyl lollipop that has to be tracked differently. But if you're talking about different sizes of, fentanyl, 5, whatever, vials of fentanyl, it might be a 10 mil, maybe a 5 mil, it might be those little 2, those ampules, one-time uses, still all fentanyl being used, and it can all be in the same logbook.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. And okay, one last question if you have time for it. So this question comes from Lori. We keep completely electronic logs. Is an unopened and open container required? Our software keeps it all together right now. So for example, if we have 2 bottles, it says, and part of an open one, it says we have, 24.35 mils. Yeah.
And that's fine. You can do it that way. You can. So, I mean, that's a perpetual inventory. You are literally saying that, I started out with 10 gallons and now we're up to 20, but now we're back down to 15, but then we're up to 25. You just keep adding and subtracting as you buy stuff and put it in and as you use stuff. So if it's working for you, great. You don't have to have 2 separate ones.
Okay. Perfect. Oh, and are you supposed to have bound logbooks? Do they have to be like that? I know we get this question a lot. Does it have to be bound?
There's nothing in the DEA regs, the CFRs, anything that says they have to be bound. It's kind of best practice because you don't want stuff, it can rip out. We've had issues where we go, oh man, where did this page come from? But then it comes back to economics. If you can't afford to bound logbooks and you want to take pieces of paper and create your own logbooks, you can do that too. I mean, personally, I think that some type of bound logbook or spiraled notebook put together is better because we don't have to worry about, pages, coming or people cooking the books, pulling pages out, making it work best for them and putting those pages back in. We've seen that. That's a crime. When you cook the books, that's a crime. So if you ever get into it and you're throwing your hands up and you're like, well, I'm just going to, make it work for me, don't do that. That's the one thing that a DEA person the DEA guy can charge you with a crime, cooking the books when it comes to that. That's when you call us and we can help you figure it out.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions for right now. Jack, I just want to thank you so much for spending all of your time with us, answering all the questions. That was amazing and super helpful. So reminder, everyone, there's a green button on the bottom of your screen. You can take their free online risk assessment. It does not go to the DEA. It's very safe. It's very secure. You can assess your risk in less than 60 seconds on that green button. And Kelly asked if sometimes practice management systems don't have the required information. Can you provide a list of what items need to be included? Yeah, so the DEA practitioner's manual, right? That should have all the information for them.
Yeah, so you're talking about for their logbook?
Mm-hmm.
right? And or look, I mean, I say this, but if you have a copy, or you could put a copy of one of your law books, or show them exactly, or put that out for everybody, just a picture of it on your website or whatever. I mean, you want to, most of the software packages out there today, and look, not all of them. EasyVet's is a company in New Zealand, right? I've dealt with them. There was questions with them, and they didn't understand DEA regulations and whatever. They did a pretty good job, but there were certain things they just didn't understand. So, you just want to test it. I don't care which one you have. Avamark, whatever. Just go in there and attempt to make it. Print out the logbook, put it into Excel, and it should look like Nicole, an AHA logbook. Any of the logbooks that are out there. It should meet those basic, the date, the time, who the animal is, the doctor, the drug, the amount that the balance, what you pulled out, just very basic stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of these companies went out there and they sold people on that you don't have to worry about your controlled substance logs anymore. Well, Cubex does a really good job at it because they've been doing it a while. But a lot of these other ones, there's always when you're moving data between two different points, there's always something that might, either you don't have it, it's not, you don't even realize it's not populating into that field, or, I'm just not 100%. I'm just not 100% on all of them yet. They're getting better. Some of them that passed that smell test, others just haven't.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So Kelly, I'll post a picture in the network of all the different logbooks. If you guys are looking for logbooks, I have a lot of different kinds. I have ones that are exclusively for unopened containers. I have log booklets. So, I'm definitely able to help with that if you need that. So Jack, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. Melinda, it was so great to have you. Beth Ann, it was wonderful. Jennifer, excellent. So this is recorded. You can watch the replay basically as soon as we're done. You can also share this link to anyone else who might be interested in watching. And there's also going to be a replay in our network. So just reach out to Jack at Titan Group if you have questions. If you need expert help, he's really there for us. So again, thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.